Is it fair to say that the greatest fraud check of all time happened on Saturday when Andrew Tate lost to Chase Damore? He should have never taken this fight. If there was any sort of doubt about him winning, he should have never taken this fight. And now he's going online and he's doing the babyface thing of like, you have to live, and I'd rather try and fail. No, that's not who you are. Your persona has nothing to do with failure. Your persona is about winning. Your persona is about achieving wealth and success. Your persona is not about trying, and hey, if you don't succeed, you gave it the old college try. That is the antithesis of everything that you have spewed over the past 5 or so years. So miss me with the like, I'm proud of myself for trying, and I went in there against the champion who's really good. No, you didn't. You went in there and you looked awful and you failed. And so just be honest.
You could feel it building before anyone even said it out loud. Not from one obvious mistake, but from a series of small details that didn't sit right. And once people noticed it, it stopped looking like a normal fight and started feeling like something was slipping in real time. For years, Andrew Tate built a very specific image around himself, repeating the same idea again and again that he doesn't break, doesn't fold, and doesn't lose under pressure, positioning himself as the one who stays standing while everyone else falls apart. And that image wasn't just part of his persona, it was the core of everything. Then in one night, that image took a hit, not from a dramatic knockout or a single brutal moment, but from how everything looked and felt, because the movement wasn't as sharp, the timing felt off, and the energy didn't match what people were used to seeing. And that's where it starts to get uncomfortable, because it wasn't just about what happened, it was about how different it looked from the version he had been selling for years. When it was over, the situation didn't calm down. It shifted, and instead of giving clarity, what followed made things feel even more unstable, like there was no clean way to explain what people had just watched. This wasn't just another fight, and that part matters more than people think, because this was tied to control, to reputation, to proving that nothing had changed even when people were starting to question it. On paper, everything pointed in his favor, a trained striker with years of experience going up against someone with less background, and that's exactly why expectations were so high, because this was supposed to be simple. A clean win here doesn't just count as a win, it resets momentum, brings attention back, opens bigger opportunities, and puts you right back into position without having to answer anything. But early on, something didn't match that expectation. The movement looked slower than it should, the breathing seemed heavier than expected, and by the third round, the shift wasn't subtle anymore. He wasn't controlling the pace, he wasn't pressing forward, he was reacting, adjusting, trying to get through it. And that's the moment where people stopped watching it as a performance and started questioning it. Because now it wasn't about winning clean, it was about whether he could even maintain control. And the part that really changed everything didn't even happen in the ring. It started the moment he began speaking. Losing was never built into the narrative, so when it happened, there was no clear structure for it, no direct way to address it, and instead of a sharp explanation, it came out uneven. At first, he kept it composed, gave respect to his opponent, said the expected things, kept his tone steady, and on the surface, it sounded controlled. But once you actually listen, it doesn't hold the same weight. The pauses stretch a little too long, the sentences don't land clean, and there's a noticeable gap between how it sounds and how it's supposed to sound.
I want to get spiritual about all of this. You have to understand that there are forces larger than us people. And I said that the answer was already written. Why did I get tired? I don't know. It doesn't make sense. The only thing that makes sense is that I was not supposed to win. Why was I not supposed to win? Is the world a better place now that I've lost? Maybe the win means more to Chase than it would have meant to me. Maybe Chase couldn't handle the loss. Maybe God decided, you know what, Chase has been through enough with mocking and things on the internet. Chase doesn't need the loss right now. Andrew can handle the loss better. Maybe God decided. Maybe if I won, we would have went out and celebrated that night, and Tristan would have smoked a bunch of cigars, and maybe he would have died 1 minute earlier. And maybe I get an extra minute with my brother because I lost. And if that's the case, then I'm glad I lost.
And then he says it, I got tired. That's the line that shifts everything. Not injured, not outperformed, just tired, and coming from someone who built everything on discipline, conditioning, and mental toughness. That answer doesn't just raise questions, it directly clashes with everything he's been saying for years. Because by round 3, it was already visible. The hands dropping, the footwork fading, the breathing getting heavier, and it didn't match the image he had spent years reinforcing. Even the commentators picked up on it, questioning preparation, questioning level, and some openly calling it a reality check rather than just an off night. And right there, the story flips. This isn't a strong fighter having a bad performance anymore. This starts to look like someone getting exposed under real pressure. And this is where the situation really starts to break down. Because instead of clearly owning it and saying, I wasn't ready, there's hesitation. And hesitation stands out when your entire identity is built on certainty. From that point, the explanations begin to stack: ring rust, timing, age, small technical details about the opponent, all of it gets mentioned. But one thing doesn't: preparation, and that absence is louder than everything else. Because this is someone who built a reputation on accountability, someone who said, losers always blame something else, and now the explanation avoids the one place people expect him to look. He says the training was perfect, that his condition was at its peak, that everything was done right. Which leads to a simple question that doesn't go away. If everything was right, why did it fall apart that early? That's where it stops making sense. And people noticed it immediately. Clips started spreading, old statements resurfaced, and the contrast between what he used to say and what people just watched became impossible to ignore. The man who once said, "What do you call someone who loses a loser?" is now explaining why losing doesn't really matter. And instead of stopping there, he pushes it further. He doesn't just explain the loss, he reframes it.
I have to have faith in a higher power. There's a lesson in all of this. And I don't need to know exactly what it is. If God decides that for some reason he's going to instantly gas me when I was in perfect physical condition so that I lose, then I have to accept God's decision. And I'll take the punches in the face like a man. And I'm not going to bitch. I'm not going to complain. And I'm not going to cry. I'm going to take it. God decided on that day that that's what has to happen to me. So I did it. If you're going to go through life without understanding that, without understanding that there's a grander plan, a plan that's bigger than just you and your ego. The plan is bigger than just us and our egos, guys. The plan is bigger than just, I want to win. So I have to have what I want, like a spoiled child, and what God decides and what's good for the universe and what's good for people to learn from and what's good for the general karmic retributions of the planet. Fuck all that. I want to win so that no one on the internet laughs at me.
That's the point where it stops being about boxing. Now it shifts into something else. Talk about fate, about destiny, about outcomes being decided by something bigger, something outside of direct control. And that shift lands heavier than he probably intended. Because the same person spent years saying discipline controls everything, that effort is what separates winners from losers. Now that idea starts to bend. Losing isn't framed as failure anymore, it's positioned as part of something bigger, something necessary. And that's where people start paying closer attention. Because this doesn't sound like confidence, it sounds like justification. The top G persona never operated like this. It didn't leave room for that kind of explanation. It didn't reframe losses, it didn't shift responsibility. But now the tone is different. Less intensity, less edge, more controlled, but noticeably lower energy. And that's where the real question starts to build. If outcomes are decided by something outside of you, what happens to the idea that you control everything? Because once that idea shifts, you don't just snap back to it. Then comes the next layer: money. He makes it clear that he's still successful, still winning in life, that the loss doesn't really change anything. But that creates another contradiction, because for years, winning was everything. Dominance was the goal, legacy was the message. Now suddenly the result doesn't carry the same weight. And that's where the pattern becomes clear. When he wins, it's discipline and superiority. When he loses, it's something else. External, irrelevant, reframed. That's not consistency, that's damage control. And that's when the reaction changes. Because now the criticism isn't just coming from outsiders, it starts coming from people who supported him. Because the same questions keep repeating. If preparation was perfect, why didn't it show? If discipline controls outcomes, why didn't it hear? And once those questions are out, they don't stay contained. They go backward. People start re-examining everything, past claims, past wins, past narratives. All of it gets looked at differently. The image doesn't collapse instantly, but it loses stability. And once that happens, it's hard to fully rebuild it. This stops being about one fight. It turns into a credibility issue. You can even hear it afterward, not just in what he says, but in how it's delivered. Less fire, less intensity, more fatigue. And that's what makes the moment stand out, because this isn't just about losing. It's about what happens when an identity built on certainty runs into something it can't clearly explain. For years, the message was simple: control everything, and you control the outcome. This moment challenges that, not just through the result, but through everything that came after it. And right before you try to explain it away, there's one part that still doesn't sit right. If everything was under control, why did it look like it was falling apart in real time? That's the part people don't forget. So now the question isn't just whether he lost, it's whether that version of him still holds up at all. Was this just a bad night? Or the moment the entire persona actually broke? If you see what's really going on here, you're already ahead of most people. Subscribe for more breakdowns like this.